Hey folks, it's Andrew from Gemba Red, and today we're taking a look at the Shenzhen Idea Light 450MAXc. Now this is a version using 3-watt single chip LEDs, and it has 7 wavelengths, but most of the ratio is in the 660 and 850 with only a smaller percentage in the other wavelengths like 630, 810, 830, and 1060, and of course it's got some of those blue LEDs. It's got an LCD screen that controls a bunch of different features. We can go into settings, we can adjust the timer, do the modes red and near infrared, red only or near infrared. We can turn on different pulses. We can do blue light. I'm going to turn that off because it's only 2% blue light, so the only thing it's doing is creating an unnecessary eye hazard. And it's got different pulsing. You can set it up to 10,000, but I don't think that does anything. So, probably you want to stick to, a reasonable pulse like 10 or 40 or 100 pulse. I don't think it's actually outputting 10,000 hertz because that would be pretty hard for an LED to actually do. So they should just change the programming to stop you from using high numbers that it probably can't even emit. And this settings screen keeps timing me back. It only takes like 1 or 2 seconds, and then it goes back to the home screen. So that's why I have to keep clicking the setting. We should talk to them about extending the time on this screen so it doesn't drop you back into the home screen after a couple seconds. But anyway, we're going to test it out at max brightness, 100% for both red and near infrared, and see how that goes. And then we're going to clear out the pulsing, make sure there's no pulsing when I do some of my first tests here. Okay, null for pulsing. Great. So we're going to take some intensity measurements and then later check the wavelengths with the Hopocolor OHSP-350SF. Okay, at 6 inches away, we get 48 milliwatts per centimeter squared. It does feel pretty warm and toasty, but yeah, that's the number we're getting. Most of the strongest peak is going to be the 660 because most of the wavelength is there, and then a strong peak of around 850 is the rest of the wavelengths, and then a smaller amount we'll find later when we get closer to the LEDs. So even at 12 inches away, we're still getting 48 milliwatts per centimeter squared because of the 30-degree lenses. They're going to keep that pretty strong even at longer distance away. At 24 inches away, we're still getting 48 milliwatts per centimeter squared. Again, it stays very strong even at a long distance away, so it might be a good thing because, you can kind of stand at 12 to 24 inches away and still get a very consistent dose. And then now, if we want to get a lower intensity and lower dose, then we might want to use the brightness settings to turn down the intensity. Since we can't really use distance, we'd have to be 5 or 10 feet away to actually get a reduction in true intensity. So that's why they build in these dimming features so that way you can use that to decrease your intensity. So now I decrease the brightness to 50%, so both wavelengths go down. There's no individual brightness for the reds or the near infrared channel. It's just one brightness bar for both. But we see we dropped it down to 26 milliwatts per centimeter squared at 12 inches away. So it's a significant drop down. I would say this is a really good kind of starting intensity. If you're getting a big powerful panel like this, start out at least 50% or even lower. Okay, so now let's check some of the peaks of the wavelengths here. Okay, the 630 nanometer wavelength, that's going to be a little bit more orange kind of bulbs. It does get spot on. It's 629.8, so pretty much 630, so it's right on, spot on for the red wavelength there. So the 660 specified wavelength, that's, a little bit deeper red, and that's the 655.9, so a little bit low on that end, but pretty close to 660. Okay, so the 850 specified wavelength, that is peaking at 851, so that's pretty much spot on. And remember, the majority of the ratio of this particular panel is in the 660 and 850, and there's only a smaller percentage of all the other wavelengths. So you might be able to work with Idea Light to customize different wavelength ratios. But, this, I just asked them to send me one of their stock, standard units. Okay, the 810 specified wavelength is peaking at 804.8, so almost 805. So again, a little bit on the low side, but it's pretty close to the mark. And checking the 830 wavelength, we get a peak of 827, so that's a good peak. That's pretty close. And, you know, that's my preferred wavelength for non-contact red light therapy, is to have the majority of the ratio in the 830s for non-contact, because it's really good for the systemic effects. And this is the measurement of what they claimed is the 1060 nanometer wavelength, but we get only a peak of 1045.9, so 1046, and so that's pretty far off. That's about 14 nanometers off, so that might be a disappointment to some people if they're promising 1060 and they're only getting 1046. And I do have the extended range Hopo color, so it can measure up to 1100, so it just fell short of reaching that 1060. So I did talk to Idealite about this, and you know, it's just kind of what you get from Alibaba. You don't really get a lot of verified wavelengths or you know what the specs are. But I would say 1046 is still in that kind of optical window kind of range where there's kind of a low point of water absorption, and so that's why you get better penetration from around 1050s, 1060s, 1070s. So it's still a good wavelength to include. And so the EMF measurement at about 6 inches away is 1.2, you know, 1.6 milligauss. So, you know, that's pretty low. You know, you can be comfortably 12 or 24 inches away and be pretty far outside of the EMF fields that it's generating. And of course, when we put the meter right on the panel, we get pretty high milligauss of 10, 20, you know, sometimes 30 milligauss. So, you know, that's why people are cautious about EMFs with these types of panels. They've got big fans and big internal drivers, but that's why you use them kind of comfortably, you know, 12 to 24 inches away. You still get plenty of intensity, and you can just adjust the intensity with the brightness settings. And so to test the pulse frequencies, I turned off the red and I'm only got the near infrared on, so that way I don't need to put a flicker warning on this video, and you know, we don't want to cause problems for people that are sensitive to flicker. But if you did have red on, it would pulse both the red and the near infrared. So it was struggling to produce 10 hertz. It was having some kind of noisy frequencies that were added onto the pulse, so I can't verify the 10 hertz really. It was kind of funky, so I might avoid that. But the 40 hertz is spot on, so I said it's a 40 hertz, we measure 40 hertz, everyone's happy. Okay, then I said it's 100 hertz, and we get 100 hertz measured, so that's pretty good. And of course, who could forget about those blue lights? I almost did. You know, it's kind of a big gimmick, so I just ignore it and try to keep it off. I don't remember exactly what they advertised. I think it was 460, so we're getting 453.6. So, you know, again, if that matters to you, I mean, this is the kind of cheapest, most common blue wavelength, right? That 450 to 460 peak that's used as the kind of energy producer for your white light bulbs, and that's how they make them so efficient. You've got a strong blue LED, and then that has a phosphor over it, and that's why you get white light from blue LEDs. But anyway, this is like the cheapest, most common wavelength you can get off the shelf. And so that's our review of the Shenzhen Idealite 450MAXc with 7 wavelengths. Here's the power consumption with everything at full blast, the red, the near infrared, and the blue. It's about 600 watts, so that's a lot of power. I mean, you could maybe only run 2 or maybe even 3 and get close to tripping a breaker, but really you should only need 1 panel in the front, at most 1 panel in the back. You don't need to expand it out to the sides, even though it's about 10 inches wide and 4 feet and 5 inches tall. So it's nice and big. It covers all of your torso, most of your body, and you know, you get a lot of energy, a lot of total joules, a lot of power output. So you should be, if you can't get, you know, beneficial effects from 600 watts of power, then, you know, there's something else going on here. And so some people want to be nerdy. This is the red lights at 100%, so it's just the red light mode and not the near infrared. It's 280 watts. And then here's the near infrared only mode. It is consuming 300 watts, so it's consuming a little bit more. You know, again, it might take a little bit different, you know, voltages and power consumptions for different types of LED bulbs. So this is 300. The reds were about 280. So there's a little bit difference there. But ultimately, the intensity measurements of what's the actual output is most important, because then, you know, if you have this, you have to do some assumptions and conversions of how efficient the LEDs are, how efficient the drivers are, how much power consumption the fans and the LCD screen are consuming, so it's kind of a mathematical puzzle. You know, ideally you just measure the actual output with a quality device. So the other tips I'll leave you with is that you can get your stand from Amazon if you're just doing a vertical, you know, standing upright kind of stand. Get a TV stand from Amazon, and that's probably cheaper than ordering a stand from Alibaba and then paying all the shipping charges. You know, get your panel from Alibaba and just get your stand from Amazon. And then the other tip is that I do know Shenzhen Idealite does have a spectroradiometer like this one that, you know, companies like me and maybe some other companies have been pestering them to get a better test equipment. So especially if you do get a customized panel, you know, I'm not going to test their entire catalog before they ship it to you, especially if you get a customized one or you get a different model. Tell them, hey, I want the measurements done with your spectroradiometer before you ship it to me. Get me at a couple different distances, get me at a couple different brightnesses, and so that way you know how to dose it and work with it properly. And like I said earlier, start at least 50% or lower, and you know, that might be perfectly fine for, you know, most people. And if you want to experiment with higher or lower intensities, that's fine, but you know, start at a lower intensity, turn that down to at least 50%, and you'll have an enjoyable time and you won't feel too overstimulated. And that's it. Thanks for tuning in.